Hi, and welcome back to The Light. In today's lesson, we are going to go over the dashas tab. Before we dive into this, I wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of what this section is about. This part of the lesson allows you to fine tune everything from how a year is defined to whether dashas are balanced by degree or time and how subperiods are determined. You'll also find more advanced configuration options here for various dashas and how they progress. The most important takeaway is be consistent. Your settings here impact the way dashas are timed and interpreted. Pick the approach that aligns with your training and how you have been taught. Think of this section as setting the foundation for how timing systems operate beneath the surface. Let's walk through each of these categories so you can understand how they control and influence the timelines in your readings. We go to our red screwdriver and blue wrench at the top left-hand corner of the screen. You will see our familiar set of icons pop up. We're going to look at the Dashas tab right now, and we're going to click on it. And you can see our familiar user preference pop-up window opens. And your Dasha tab is the fourth tab from the right. Another way to get to this pop-up windows is by going to Options, clicking on the drop-down, and going to Dasha Options. When we click on this, you'll see the same window open. And here we are again with dashas at the fourth tab from the right. You'll see here three major sections. Starting from the left, this indicates the general dasha framework setting. The middle section shows us dasha types and some of its sequencing and configurations. And at the very right presents planetary conditions for rashi dashas. So let's start on the very left. And you can see this is divided into four subsections. The first one is dasha year, and there's three options here. The first one is 360, and this treats every month as 30 days, which is handy for some classical systems. It's often used in older or classical dasha calculations, especially where lunar months are emphasized. The second one, 365.25 days, this is your default setting. It corresponds to the actual solar year and aligns dasha periods with the solar calendar year and is most widely used today. If you don't know what to do, my recommendation is always to leave it on the default settings until you become more familiar with all of the options. The last of our options is 327.85. This is a more traditional option based on classical references in older Vedic astrology texts. It's rarely applied in modern practice and represents a shorter symbolic year based on certain astronomical assumptions. It's included for those who want to replicate or test calculations from older texts. If you do switch between these three options, your dasha start and end dates will shift noticeably. The next option is dasha balance method. This sets how the starting balance of the new dasha is calculated. By degree is the default and the simpler method. It calculates how far the moon has traveled through the nakshatra at the time of birth and starts the first dasha based on that portion. For example, if the moon had just entered the nakshatra, almost the whole first mahadasha would remain. If it enters mid-nakshatra, you'd have about half the first mahadasha remaining. And near the end of the nakshatra, only a fraction of the mahadasha would remain. The second option by time goes a step further. It accounts for how fast or slow the moon was moving at the time of birth. If the moon was moving faster than average, it would have covered those degrees in less time. Less of the dasha period is still remaining when the person was born. If the moon was slower than average, it took longer to cover those degrees. More time is left in that first dasha. If you choose by time, the length of your first mahadasha may appear longer or shorter compared to by degree, depending how fast the moon was moving at birth. Choose one method and stick with it. And as always, if you're unsure, pick the default, which is by degree. The next section, dasha month, shows how months are shown in the dasha table by name, such as January to December, or by number, which is the numbers 1 through 12, indicative of the 12 months. This is display only, calculations don't change, and this is a personal preference. Our last of the subsections is dasha change. This option controls how the transition from one dasha period to the next is displayed in your charts and tables. The date only shows the calendar date of the dasha change, for example, August 30th, 2025, while the date and time includes a timestamp of when the transition actually occurred, such as August 30th, 2025, 4:47. Use date and time if you want high precision, especially if you're looking for transit timing, event charts, or muhurtas. Remember, this doesn't affect the actual dasha calculations, just how precisely the information is presented on screen or in your report. Choose whatever style fits your personal needs. So that's it for our first section. And moving on to our middle or second section, this shows us dasha type and configurations or sequencing preferences. You can see here we have 4 major subsections, and I'm going to start with the first one. This is your Kala Chakra Daśā. This is a rashi dasha, which means it uses zodiac signs and not planets to lay out timelines and cycles. That's a big difference compared to systems like Vimshotri, which are based on planetary lords. In Kala Chakra, the sequence of dashas is determined by the moon's nakshatra, but the periods themselves are assigned to signs like Aries, Taurus, etc. in a fixed order. Instead of a Venus period, you might be in a Libra period because that's the sign being activated. In the settings, you'll also be able to choose how many sub-periods, as you see here in this first section, either 9 or 12 that you would like. Choose 9 for the classic breakdown or 12 for a more detailed timing grid. The second one, the 12 Antara dashas, is your default. Just remember to keep it consistent. The next subsection is where it gets a little technical, and I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible. In the Kala Chakra Daśā, we are working with nakshatras and specifically the padas, which are the 4 quarters of each nakshatra. This setting controls how the sequence behaves when the moon moves from one pada to the next. If you choose the first option, cycle through Mahadasha with the same pada, this means that each time the moon enters a new pada, the entire Mahadasha sequence restarts and repeats from the beginning, not just looping in a single pada, but repeating the same sign-based sequence per segment. If pada 1 is Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and Cancer, pada 2 is also Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and Cancer, and so on. Every time the moon enters a new pada, the dasha sequence hits a rinse and repeat, and in this example begins fresh from Aries. But should you choose the second option, which is continue Mahadasha in following pada, the sequence keeps going through the signs with no rinse and repeat or restart. If the first pada is Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, the second one continues to Leo, Virgo, Libra, and Scorpio, and so on. Instead of looping, it flows continuously from one sign to the next. Most astrologers stick with the continue option. It is the default, but as always, follow your training and your teacher when choosing between the two. Moving to our second, or technically third section here, is the Chara Daśā method. And you see here, there's 5 options to choose from. Just like Kala Chakra, Chara Daśā is also a sign-based timing system, which means your time periods are mapped through the signs and not planetary cycles. But while Kala Chakra is structured around the moon's nakshatra, Daśā follows a different approach rooted in what's called the Jaimini tradition. Jaimini is another branch of Vedic astrology. I'm not going to speak to it in detail right now, as I just want to go through the technicalities of each of these sections. Here, the sequence and duration of dashas is dependent on key chart factors like your rising sign, planetary placements, and what is called the Jaimini Karakas, which are special role-based planetary indicators. The dasha flow is highly personalized and changes from chart to chart. Going through our options here, the first one is Parashara, and this is a classical baseline from older texts. The second one is K.N. Rao, the most commonly taught method today and the default in this software. It usually starts from the ascendants and follows clear sign rules. The third option, K.S. Charak, is similar to Rao with a few subtle differences. The fourth one is S. Rath, stands for Sanjay Rath, which is another refined Jaimini-focused method. And the last option is Antara Dashas start from the Dasha Lord, If you turn this on, the sub-periods begin from the sign ruled by the dashas ruling planet instead of following a preset pattern. While Chara Daśā is similar in structure to Kala Chakra, the logic behind how it unfolds is Jaimini specific, and choose a method that matches your training and stick with it for consistency. The next section is Padana Dumpsa Dasha method. This is another specialized dasha system. And this also goes deeper using the nakshatra padas. You can think of all of these dashas as zooming in for more precise timing, especially in understanding different shifts in our life. There are two main approaches here. The first one is Irangati, which follows the rules laid out by Irangati Ragacharya, a renowned Jaimini scholar. His method uses a specific logic for how dasha sequences unfold based on sign and pada placements. K.N. Rao, this version, which is the default in Parashara's light, uses a different sequencing taught in his lineage. It may feel more straightforward if you're new to this dasha system. And lastly, you'll see the checkbox for 1 year dasha when its own sign. If you turn this on, anytime a dasha period lands in its own sign, for example, Saturn in Capricorn, it automatically gets assigned a 1 year duration. And as always, if you're not clear on what these are, just leave it at the default. Our last subsection, which is the Varṣaphal. What is the Varṣaphal? This is your annual solar return. It's a snapshot of the sky at the exact moment when the sun returns to your position at birth, but in the current year. It's a very powerful tool used in Vedic astrology for making year-ahead predictions, highlighting themes and opportunities and challenges specific to the 12 months that follow somebody's birthday. You can think of this again as zooming in to reveal how patterns can unfold in the coming year. You'll see 4 options here. The first 3 all have to do with what's called the Muda Dasha, and in essence are condensed version of the Vimshotri Dasha to 1 year. They take the full 120-year planetary cycle and compress it into a single year, so you can apply the same timing logic. The first one, Muda Dasha, is the most common option and the default. It takes your birth Vimshotri Dasha and scales it down to a 1-year format. The starting point comes from your moon's nakshatra, and the dasha progresses 1 year by 1 nakshatra. This method blends well the Vedic timing systems and is a great go-to for most users. The second one, that is Muda Dasha, Kali Dasha, follows a classical approach based on Vedic scriptures. Here, the starting point isn't your natal moon, but instead the ruler of your Varṣaphal Lagna. The dasha then follows the natural planetary order. And the last one, Muda Dasha without dasha balance, does not carry forward any remaining balance from the previous Muda Dasha cycle and resets each year. Our last dasha option here, the Patyayini Dasha, is a completely different system used in the Tajika school of thought. It's not based on Vimshotri or nakshatras, but has its own sequence. It divides the year by periods ruled by different planets and the lagna, each governing a certain number of days, and indicates major trends or events for the coming year. If you're not sure which one to use, stick with the first one, the Muda Dasha. It's the default. But as always, you're welcome to play with these. And moving on to the right and last section, this presents the planetary conditions for rashi dashas. The first up is Rahu's exaltation sign. This choice affects how strong Rahu is treated. You can choose between Taurus or Gemini, and whichever sign you select will be considered Rahu's exaltation sign. And this sign will give Rahu maximum power during its Mahadasha or Bhuktis. The next one is Mercury's exaltation. If you select exalted according to degree, this is when Mercury is considered exalted around 15 degrees of Virgo, its exact exaltation point. But if you choose the second option, exalted anywhere in Virgo, Mercury will be treated as exalted through the entire sign of Virgo, no matter what degree it is in. And finally, the last option here is start of Rashi and Tara Daśās. This setting controls when these sub-periods begin. If you select the sign, sub-periods start from the sign itself. And if you pick from the Lord, the Antara Dasha sequence begins from the planetary Lord of the Mahadasha sign. This can change the sub-period order entirely depending on the chart. So that wraps it up for our deep dive into the Dasha tab. By now, you've seen how customizable Parashara's light really is, from choosing the length of a year to selecting methods for complex dashas and defining exaltation logic. The key takeaway here is consistency. Whatever options you choose, just stick with that same approach across your charts. This will allow to keep your timelines aligned and strengthen your confidence in reading patterns and making predictions. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in our next lesson and keep shining your light.